She was invisible to the world. Just another waitress refilling coffee cups and clearing plates. But what nobody knew was that every night, in the back corner of that kitchen, she was solving a problem that stumped a billion-dollar company for 7 months. And when one curious billionaire finally looked beyond the apron, everything changed. This is a true story about the most expensive mistake companies make every single day, and a 34-year-old woman who proved them all wrong. Stay with me, because what happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about success. Welcome to Radiant Story and Tales. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you are watching from. You know, sometimes life surprises you in the most ordinary places. This is a story about one of those moments, a moment that changed 2 lives forever. Picture this. A quiet evening at Rosewood Bistro, a cozy little restaurant tucked away on the corner of 5th Street. The kind of place where the lights are warm, the music is soft, and everyone who walks through the door feels like they belong. It was a Tuesday night, nothing special, just another evening in a week full of evenings. But for David Harper, this Tuesday was about to become unforgettable. David was 41 years old, and if you looked at him from the outside, you'd say he had everything. He was a founder and CEO of Horizon Tech, a company worth over $1 billion. He wore expensive suits, drove a car that cost more than most people's houses, and his face had been on the cover of business magazines. Success, right? That's what everyone thought. But here's the thing about success. Sometimes it comes with problems that money can't solve. That night, David sat in his usual booth at Rosewood Bistro, surrounded by 5 members of his executive team. They were supposed to be celebrating, but the mood felt heavy. For the past 7 months, Horizon Tech had been working on their biggest project ever. A major client, Westfield Industries, had hired them to solve a massive logistics problem. They needed a system that could manage supply chains across 15 countries, predict delays before they happened, and save them millions of dollars. 7 months, hundreds of thousands of dollars spent, the best engineers money could buy, all working day and night. And they had nothing, not a single breakthrough, not even close. David rubbed his temples as his chief technology officer droned on about another failed approach. The deadline was Friday, just 3 days away. If they didn't present a solution, Westfield would walk away. $25 million gone. But worse than the money was the failure itself. David had built his reputation on solving impossible problems. This one was crushing him. That's when something caught his eye. Through the small window that separated the dining room from the kitchen, David noticed someone sitting at a corner table in the back. It was one of the servers, a woman he'd seen many times before. She always had a kind smile, the type that made you feel seen even when you were just another customer. But tonight, she wasn't serving anyone. She was on her break, hunched over a laptop, her fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard. David squinted, trying to see what she was working on, and then his heart skipped. On her screen were lines of code, complex, beautiful code, algorithms that looked strangely familiar. They looked almost exactly like the problem his team had been failing to solve for months. Could it be? No, that was impossible. But David couldn't look away. He watched as this woman, this server who brought him coffee and remembered how he liked his steak cooked, worked on something that looked like genius. His CFO was talking about cutting losses and moving on to other projects, but David wasn't listening anymore. Something was pulling him toward that kitchen, toward that woman and her laptop, toward a possibility he hadn't expected. Sometimes the answers we're looking for aren't in the places we think to look. Sometimes they're right there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to be curious enough to see them. David excused himself from the table, ignoring confused looks from his team. His heart was pounding as he walked toward the kitchen entrance. He didn't know what he was about to discover, but something told him this moment mattered. And he was right. Her name was Elena Torres. And if you had asked her that morning if her life was about to change, she would have laughed and said no. Elena was 34 years old, and she'd been working at Rosewood Bistro for almost 4 years. 4 years of double shifts or feet, and smiling even when she was exhausted. She was good at her job, really good. Customers loved her because she remembered their names, asked about their families, and somehow made everyone feel like they were the only person in the room. But here's what most people didn't know about Elena. She was brilliant. 10 years ago, she graduated with a degree in computer science from Riverside Community College. She'd worked so hard for that degree, studying late into the night after a shift at a grocery store, borrowing textbooks she couldn't afford to buy, teaching herself programming languages from free online courses. When she finally held that diploma in her hands, she cried. It felt like the beginning of everything. Except it wasn't. Elena sent out hundreds of applications to tech companies. Big ones, small ones, startups, established corporations. It didn't matter. She applied everywhere. And everywhere she applied, she got the same response. Nothing. Or worse, a polite rejection email that said something like, "We're looking for candidates with experience from top-tier universities." Top-tier universities. That phrase haunted her. It didn't matter that she'd scored perfectly on coding challenges. It didn't matter that she'd built her own projects and taught herself advanced algorithms. Her community college degree wasn't good enough. She wasn't good enough. So Elena did what she had to do. She took a job at Rosewood Bistro, telling herself it was temporary, just until something better came along. But months turned into years, and eventually, she stopped expecting anything to change. But she never stopped coding. Every night after a shift, Elena would pull out her laptop and work on projects that no one would ever see. She built apps, created algorithms, solved problems just for the joy of solving them. Coding made her feel alive in a way nothing else did. It was like music, like poetry, like magic, taking nothing but ideas and turning them into something real. For the past 2 months, Elena had been working on something special. She called it Riverflow, and it was designed to solve one of the biggest problems in modern business: supply chain management. The idea came to her one night during the dinner rush. Rosewood Bistro had been absolutely slammed. Every table full, orders backing up in the kitchen, servers running in 10 directions at once. But somehow, they'd made it work. And as Elena watched the beautiful chaos unfold, she realized something. The kitchen wasn't just following rules and procedures. It was flowing. The chef anticipated what servers would need before they asked. The dishwasher started prepping plates before orders came in. Everyone was reading subtle signals, adapting in real time. That's when it hit her. What if supply chains could work the same way? Instead of rigid systems that followed predetermined patterns, what if they could flow like a well-run kitchen, reading signals and adapting before problems even appeared? She spent weeks building Riverflow, pouring everything she knew into the code. It was beautiful, elegant, and powerful. But it was also pointless because no one would ever see it. No company would look at work from a waitress with a community college degree. That night, during her break, Elena sat in her usual spot in the back corner of the kitchen and opened her laptop. The dining room was finally quiet, and she had 30 minutes to herself. She pulled up Riverflow and kept working, even though she knew it was just for her own satisfaction. That's when she heard a voice behind her. "Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help noticing what you're working on." Elena's head snapped up. Standing there was a man from table 7, one of the regular customers, always well-dressed, always polite. She'd served him dozens of times, but never really talked to him beyond taking his order. Her first instinct was to close the laptop. She felt suddenly embarrassed, like she'd been caught doing something wrong. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to bother anyone. I'm just on my break." "Please don't apologize," the man said, and his voice was gentle. "What you're working on, is that a supply chain optimization algorithm?" Elena froze. How could he possibly know that just from glancing at her screen? The man stepped closer, his eyes fixed on her laptop. "That's incredible. The way you're handling the predictive modeling. I've never seen that approach before. May I ask how it works?" And something in his voice made Elena trust him. Maybe it was the genuine curiosity in his eyes. Maybe it was the fact that he was looking at her code with respect, not condescension. Or maybe she was just tired of keeping her work hidden. So she started explaining Riverflow to the stranger, and as she talked, something amazing happened. He understood, not just the basics. He understood the deep, complex thinking behind every choice she'd made. He asked questions that showed real knowledge, real expertise. They talked for 20 minutes straight, diving deep into algorithms and data structures and predictive modeling. Elena felt more alive than she had in years. Finally, the man looked up from her laptop and said something that made Elena's heart stop. "I'm David Harper. I run a technology company called Horizon Tech. And what you just shown me, it might be the solution to a problem my entire team has been trying to solve for 7 months." Elena's world tilted. David Harper. She knew that name. Everyone knew that name. He was one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in the country. And he was telling her that her code, her impossible, pointless project that no one was. Here's the thing about hope. When you've been disappointed enough times, it becomes dangerous. Hope can break your heart worse than anything else. Elena stared at David Harper. Try to process what he just said. Part of her wanted to believe him, but a louder part, the part that had been rejected hundreds of times, kept whispering that this couldn't be real. "I appreciate you saying that," Elena said carefully, starting to close her laptop. "But I'm sure your team has access to much better resources than anything I could create. I'm just what?" David interrupted gently. "Just a waitress? Is that what you were going to say?" Elena felt her cheeks flush. That was exactly what she'd been about to say. David pulled up a chair and sat down across from her. "Elena, it is Elena, right?" She nodded, surprised he knew her name. "Elena, I need to be completely honest with you. My company is in trouble. We have a major client waiting for a solution that we don't have. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars hiring the best engineers from MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, all the schools that supposedly produce the smartest people in tech. And in 7 months, they haven't produced anything close to what I just saw on your screen." He paused, and Elena could see something raw in his eyes. Desperation, maybe, or exhaustion. "I built Horizon Tech 20 years ago because I believed technology could change the world," David continued. "But somewhere along the way, I forgot something important. I forgot that genius doesn't care about where you went to school or what's on your resume. Genius just is, and right now I'm looking at it." Elena felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She'd waited so long to hear anyone, say words like these. "But even if what I built is good," she said quietly, "why would your team listen to me? Why would your client trust solutions from someone who serves soup for a living?" "Because I'll make them listen," David said firmly. "Elena, I want to hire you. Not as a waitress, not as an assistant, as a lead consultant on our biggest project. I want you to present Riverflow to Westfield Industries this Friday. I want to give you full credit for your work. And if this works the way I think it will, I want to offer you a permanent position at Horizon Tech." The kitchen suddenly felt very small and very quiet. Elena could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. This was everything she'd ever wanted. Everything she dreamed about during those long nights of studying, those hundreds of rejected applications, those 4 years of pretending she was happy serving tables. But it was also terrifying. "What if I fail?" she whispered. "What if Riverflow doesn't work? What if I embarrass you in front of your client?" David smiled, and it was the saddest, most understanding smile Elena had ever seen. "Then we fail together." "But Elena, I've spent 20 years in this industry. I've seen thousands of presentations, reviewed countless algorithms, hired hundreds of developers, and I'm telling you, what you've created is extraordinary. I'm not offering you this opportunity because I feel sorry for you. I'm offering it because I need you. My company needs you." Elena took a shaky breath. Outside the kitchen window, she could see the nearly empty dining room. Table 7, where David had been sitting, was covered with papers and laptops. His whole team was probably wondering where he'd gone. Her whole life, Elena had played it safe. She'd accepted rejection. She'd lowered her expectations. She convinced herself that some dreams just weren't meant for people like her. But what if she was wrong? What if this one moment, this impossible, unlikely moment, was her chance? "Okay," Elena heard herself say. "Yes, I'll do it." David's face broke into the biggest smile. "Thank you. You won't regret this. I promise. Over the next 2 hours, Elena and David sat in that kitchen, going through every detail of river flow. Elena explained her thinking, showed him the code, walked him through test scenarios. And the more she explained, the more excited David became. This is revolutionary, he kept saying. Your approach isn't just different, it's better. Instead of trying to control every variable, you're teaching the system to adapt. It's like the difference between following a map and actually understanding the terrain. Exactly. Elena said, her exhaustion forgotten. Traditional systems are so rigid, they break down as soon as something unexpected happens. But river flow learns. It reads patterns that other systems ignore. Tiny delays, micro-adjustments, the ripple effects that happen before major disruptions. David pulled out his phone and started making calls. Elena watched in amazement as he rearranged his entire schedule, called emergency meetings, and began the process of integrating her work into his company's presentation. David, she said during a break between his calls, are you really sure about this? You're risking so much on someone you just met. He looked at her directly, and his voice was absolutely certain. Elena, the biggest risks I've taken in my career have always been on people that everyone else overlooked. That's how I built Horizon Tech in the first place. I'm not taking a risk on you. I'm making the smartest business decision I've made in years. By the time they finally left Rosewood Bistro that night, it was past midnight. Elena's manager, Paolo, watched them leave with a confused but happy expression. Good luck, Elena, he called out. Whatever you're doing, I know you're going to be amazing. As Elena walked to her car, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder, she felt like she was floating. In the span of 3 hours, her entire life had changed direction. The question now was, could she actually deliver? Could she stand in front of executives and investors and prove that her work was worth believing in? She had 3 days to find out. Have you ever had one of those moments where everything you've ever worked for comes down to a single hour? Where years of effort, all your dreams and fears, crystallize into one terrifying test? For Elena Torres, that moment arrived on Friday afternoon at exactly 2 p.m. The conference room at Horizon Tech was enormous, all glass walls and modern furniture, with a view of the city skyline that probably cost more than Elena made in a year. Around the massive table sat 12 people. David's executive team, the chief operations officer of Westfield Industries, and several senior vice presidents Elena had only ever seen in business news articles. And there she stood, at the front of the room, her laptop connected to a huge screen, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her notes. The past 3 days have been the most intense of Elena's life. David had introduced her to Horizon Tech's development team, and at first, they'd been skeptical. She could see in their faces the doubt, the confusion about why their CEO had brought in a complete unknown to solve their biggest problem. But then she'd started showing them river flow, and one by one, their expressions had changed from skepticism to fascination. This is brilliant. One senior engineer had whispered during their first review session, "How did you think of this approach?" Elena had smiled. "I learned it from watching a restaurant kitchen during dinner rush." Now, standing in this intimidating conference room, Elena took a deep breath and began her presentation. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elena Torres, and I'm here to show you a completely new approach to supply chain optimization. Her voice only shook a little on the first sentence. After that, something magical happened. She forgot to be nervous, because once she started talking about river flow, once she began explaining the ideas that had kept her up at night for months, everything else fell away. She showed them how traditional systems treated supply chains like machines, predictable, controllable, following predetermined paths. But real supply chains were machines. They were more like rivers, constantly flowing, adapting to obstacles, finding new paths when old ones were blocked. River flow doesn't just respond to problems, Elena explained, clicking through demonstrations on the screen. It anticipates them. It reads microsignals that other systems ignore, tiny delays between decision points, subtle patterns in order and behavior, even external factors like weather and local events that might impact delivery times. She pulled up a simulation showing how river flow would handle Westfield Industries' current supply chain challenges. The room fell silent as the data played out on the screen, showing a 42% improvement in efficiency and a 60% reduction in unexpected delays. "How is this possible?" Westfield COO asked, leaning forward. "We've consulted with 3 other firms, and none of them projected improvements anywhere near this." Elena smiled, because they were trying to control the chaos. River flow embraces it. We teach the system to flow with disruptions rather than fight against them. For the next 30 minutes, Elena answered every technical question they threw at her. She explained algorithms, walked through edge cases, demonstrated how river flow would integrate with existing systems. And with every answer, she could feel the room's energy shifting. They were believing her. These executives who probably would have deleted her resume without a second glance if she'd applied through normal channels. They were believing in her work. Finally, Westfield COO stood up and extended his hand to Elena. "Ms. Torres, this is the most impressive presentation I've seen in my 15 years with this company. We'd like to move forward immediately." Elena shook his hand, hardly believing what she was hearing. David caught her eye from across the room, and the proud smile on his face said everything. After the meeting, as the Westfield team filed out discussing implementation timelines, David's executive team gathered around Elena. "I owe you an apology," said Jennifer, Horizon Tech's chief technology officer. "When David told us he was bringing in an outside consultant, I thought he'd lost his mind. I was wrong. What you've built is extraordinary." "Thank you," Elena said, still feeling like she was in a dream. "Where did you study?" asked another executive. "Which research lab are you from?" Elena hesitated for just a moment. Then she lifted her chin and said clearly, "I have a degree in computer science from Riverside Community College. And before this week, I was working as a server at Rosewood Bistro." The room went completely silent. Several people's mouths literally fell open. "You're joking," someone said. "I'm not," Elena replied calmly. "I've been trying to break into tech for 10 years. Every company I applied to rejected me because my degree wasn't from the right school. So I kept coding on my own, kept learning, kept building. Because I love this work, whether anyone was paying attention or not." Jennifer's face had gone pale. "Elena, I think I need to apologize again. I just remembered we got an application from someone at Riverside Community College about 6 months ago. I'm almost certain it was you, and I'm almost certain our automated screening system rejected it without anyone ever looking at your actual qualifications." The shame in her voice was obvious, and Elena felt a complicated mix of emotions. Vindication, yes, but also sadness for all the time she'd lost, all the opportunities she'd been denied. "I understand why it happened," Elena said quietly. "The system is set up to filter people like me out. But maybe now we can start changing that system." David stepped forward and put a hand on Elena's shoulder. "That's exactly what we're going to do. Elena, I want to officially offer you a position as Director of Innovation at Horizon Tech. But more than that, I want you to help us redesign our entire hiring process. Help us find other talented people who've been overlooked. Help us build a company that actually lives up to its values." Elena felt tears streaming down her face, but she didn't care anymore. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll do it." As the room erupted in applause, Elena thought about all the nights she'd spent coding in that restaurant kitchen, wondering if anyone would ever care about her work. She thought about every rejection letter, every automated email telling her she wasn't good enough, and she realized something important. She'd always been good enough. The world just needed to learn how to see. 6 months later, Elena Torres walked to the front doors of Rosewood Bistro, wearing a professional suit instead of a server's apron, and it felt both strange and wonderful. The dinner rush was just beginning, and familiar sounds and smells wrapped around her like a warm hug. Paolo spotted her from across the dining room and rushed over to embrace her. "Look at you," he exclaimed. "Our famous innovator returns." Elena laughed. "I'm not famous, Paolo. I just got lucky." "Lucky." A voice called from the kitchen. Carlos, the head chef, emerged wiping his hands on his apron. "Is that what we're calling genius now?" "Lucky." Elena had come back to Rosewood Bistro for a specific reason. Over the past 6 months, her life had transformed in ways she still couldn't quite believe. River flow had been implemented at Westfield Industries and 11 other major corporations. The results had exceeded even her optimistic projections. Supply chain efficiency up by an average of 40%, cost savings in the millions of dollars. But more importantly, Elena had kept her promise to David. Together, they completely restructured how Horizon Tech discovered and hired talent. "I actually came here tonight to talk to you, Carlos," Elena said, pulling out her laptop. "Do you remember those conversations we used to have about kitchen efficiency?" Carlos raised an eyebrow. "The ones where I complained about how our ordering system was stuck in the 1990s? Exactly those. What if I told you I've been working on something that could revolutionize how restaurants manage their operations? And what if I told you I need someone with real restaurant experience to help develop it?" Carlos's eyes widened. "Elena, I'm a chef, not a tech person." "You're a problem solver," Elena corrected. "You understand workflow and efficiency better than most engineers I've met. That's what matters." This was a new initiative Elena had launched at Horizon Tech, seeking expertise from unconventional places. She'd already hired a former warehouse manager whose inventory tracking ideas had improved their logistics algorithms. She brought on a transit bus driver whose understanding of traffic patterns had enhanced their urban planning software. And now she wanted Carlos to help develop the next generation of restaurant management systems. "But I don't have any formal training," Carlos protested, though Elena could see the interest in his eyes. "Neither did I, when David took a chance on me," Elena said softly. "All you need is the willingness to learn and share what you already know. We'll teach you everything else." As Elena spent the evening in her old workplace, she marveled at how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. The restaurant still got chaotic during rush hours. Paolo still told the same jokes. Customers still needed their coffee refilled. But now when Elena looked at the organized chaos of dinner service, she didn't see a place she'd left behind. She saw the inspiration for everything she'd built, the foundation that had taught her how to recognize patterns and solve problems. Later that night, David stopped by to join her for a late dinner. It had become a tradition. Every few weeks, they'd meet at Rosewood Bistro to remember where Elena's journey had begun. "I have news," David said as they settled into a booth. "Our board approved the scholarship program you proposed. Starting next year, Horizon Tech will be funding full scholarships for 50 students at community colleges who want to study technology. And every single one of them will have a guaranteed interview for internships, regardless of their GPA or pedigree." Elena felt tears prickling her eyes again. She seemed to cry a lot these days. Happy tears, grateful tears, tears for the younger version of herself who thought she'd never get a chance. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else would." David shook his head. "No, Elena. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for keeping your passion alive, even when the world told you it didn't matter. You didn't just save my company. You reminded me why I started in the first place." As they talked through the evening, Elena thought about all the other people out there like she had been. Brilliant minds working night shifts, developing solutions in their spare time, convinced that no one would ever give them a chance. How many innovations were being lost because the people creating them didn't have the right credentials? How much potential was being wasted because companies only looked in the same predictable places for talent? Elena had made it her mission to answer those questions. The scholarship program was just the beginning. She'd started speaking at community colleges, sharing her story and encouraging students not to give up. She'd partnered with coding boot camps and vocational schools, creating pipelines for alternative talent to enter the tech industry. And every time she met someone who reminded her of herself, someone brilliant and overlooked, someone who'd been told they weren't good enough, she made sure they knew the truth. Genius doesn't care about where you come from or what school you attended. Genius just needs an opportunity to shine. 3 months after that dinner at Rosewood Bistro, Elena stood on a stage at a major technology conference, addressing an audience of 2,000 industry leaders. Her topic, finding innovation in unexpected places. I spent 4 years serving tables while the tech industry told me I wasn't worthy of their attention, she said, her voice clear and confident. Not because I lacked skills, but because I lacked the right credentials. How many other talented people are we missing because we've created arbitrary barriers that have nothing to do with actual ability? After her speech, she was surrounded by executives wanting to talk about reforming their hiring practices, by entrepreneurs excited to find overlooked talent, by students who'd been rejected dozens of times and were ready to give up until they heard that someone like them had made it. That night, Elena received an email that made her stop and stare at her phone in disbelief. It was from the National Technology Foundation, informing her that she'd been selected as one of their Innovators of the Year. She immediately called David, barely able to speak through her excitement and tears. "This is impossible," she kept saying. "People like me don't win awards like this." "Elena," David said gently, "you need to stop thinking of yourself as people like me. You're not an overlooked waitress anymore. You're a director at a major tech company. You're an innovator whose work is changing entire industries. You're a role model for thousands of people who need to see that success is possible." And he was right. Elena had spent so long thinking of herself as the underdog, the outsider, the person who didn't belong. But that wasn't her story anymore. Now she was the person who opened doors for others, the one who proved that talent could emerge from anywhere. Looking back, Elena often thought about that Tuesday night when David Harper had noticed her coding in the kitchen. How different her life would be if he'd stayed at his table, if he'd ignored his curiosity, if he dismissed her work because of where she came from. But he didn't. He looked past the surface and saw what mattered. And in doing so, he changed not just her life, but the lives of countless others who would benefit from the doors she was now opening. Sometimes Elena still pulled out her laptop and worked at Rosewood Bistro during quiet evenings, sitting in that same corner of the kitchen where everything had changed. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to remember the struggle, the rejection, the doubt. Remember the moment when someone finally saw her for who she really was. And remember that inside every restaurant, every warehouse, every unexpected place, there might be someone with a brilliant idea just waiting for the chance to share it with the world. All they need is someone willing to look. Remember, extraordinary talent exists everywhere. Sometimes the solution to your biggest problem is closer than you think. You just need to be curious enough to see it.